Hello everyone, welcome to my new video, quick guide on discovery phase in an RPA project. So this is the first video I'm doing for 2021, and because of that, wish you all a very happy new year before we start. So in this video, we'll be looking at why we need to make sure that we do the process discovery properly, and what are the areas that we need to look into, or the areas we need to aim to do a successful process discovery. Okay, so to start, we look at the main areas that we need to focus on for a process discovery. So, why it is important? It is important because in an RPA project, we are not just trying to introduce a software system or a software application. We are trying to focus on automating a repetitive set of tasks in a process to improve the efficiency and the accuracy of the process. So for that, we need to look into various different aspects. Basically, we need to look into the entire process and find what areas we can improve and whether the process itself is suitable for automation. So to do that, we are looking into various different aspects. So the aim of the process discovery should be to find and calculate the complexity of the processes and to understand whether that process is suitable for automation in what percentage, which is the automation potential. And then once we do the analysis, we need to figure out whether that whether automating that process will give us a, a, a proper benefit to achieve the goals of the company. And then we need to prioritize, because in some cases, based on our experience, when we go for process automation, sometimes the organization do know which process that we should automate, and sometimes they don't have much idea on what process to automate and when and which department to focus on. So there are a lot of things. So in that case, whatever the process we identify, we need to prioritize and then do the automation. So the process discovery is a set of tasks that we first find the processes and then find the automation potential, the benefits, and then finally prioritize them for automation. So what approach should we take to do this? So what you see on screen are some of the steps that we can focus on. First thing is we need to find a proper strategy to prioritize them and find the best processes. So here, in our experience, as I said earlier, the organization might know the processes that they think it should be automated. And on the other hand, they might not have the expertise to find the processes that should be automated. So what we have to do is we need to come up with a strategy to identify which department to focus first and which process to focus first in those departments or multiple divisions. It can be HR, it can be finance, it can be audit, or whatever the department. First, based on the urgency and the goals that the management have for the organization, they need to prioritize these processes or the departments. Then we need to find what processes to look at. So in a department, there can be multiple processes that are being done manually and by different people. So we need to focus on those things and find the list of processes that we are going to assess. And just looking into these processes, we cannot say that it can be automated or not. So we have to do the complexity assessment and calculate the automation potential. So this complexity is calculated based on different factors, and that has to be common across all the processes in any department. So we first need to lay down those factors and then uh, do the complexity level calculation based on the information we gather, and then calculate the automation potential in that. Along with that, based on the requirement gathering sessions we do, we also need to identify what are the business benefits that automation can give for a process. So this mostly relies on the expectations of the management and the business users to make sure that those expectations are met by introducing automation. And once we identify these processes and once we do the complete analysis, then we need to map these processes into automation quadrants. We'll be talking about those things later. And then after that, we can easily prioritize. So this is the usual approach we take to do the process discovery. So this process discovery phase can be separated into three main different phases. One is the requirement gathering. The second one is to analyze what you gathered. The third one is based on the analysis, design your to be process. So to do that, the main thing is we need to find the process, the important resources. So who are the resources we have? From the team who do this assessment and the implementation of the process, there has to be certain key people involved, such as the business analyst and the solution architect. So these two are the guys who will look into the process and do a detailed analysis of the as-is process and then figure out whether it's suitable for automation or not, or where things can be improved. So with them, from the business side, you have to have several other people, the key people, like the domain experts who know the domain. So we as technical people, we are not experts in finance domain, or we are not experts in different other domains. So we need to find the domain experts from the organization who knows in and out of the domain itself, so that they can guide us while we do the assessment to carry out the assessment properly and to come up with a proper result. And then again, we need to have the process experts. Those are the people who actually do the process step by step, and they are the people who know in and out what information they get and how they transform that information into different outputs, and then what are the exceptions they need to focus on and how those are handled, and who are the other people they need to contact, and what kind of output we get at the end. So there are a lot of things involved. So process experts and the people who carry out the process every day, they need to be there, and it is very important for them to be there, because otherwise we will be just going through the process without much insight, and we might not come up with the expected outputs. And on the other hand, the operational experts, those are the business analysts and the solution architects from the uh, solution provider side. So those three parties has to be there in any process discovery. So once we have all the resources, all the key people from all both sides, what's the next step? Next step is to do a proper awareness session, because these business people, the process experts and the domain expert, they might not know what we are exactly trying to do, and they will think that sometimes this based on some experience that I also have. Sometimes they think that we are just trying to introduce another software system and you know uh, trying to do trying to change few things, but that's not the case. In automation it's totally different. So it's always good to do a awareness session before we actually go into these requirement gathering sessions and actually doing the assessment. There are a few key things why to back that point. One is they are not technical people. They are the experts in the process. So sometimes they might think that we are trying to introduce a new software system, which might change few things so that they might not go into the detailed explanations. The other thing, they might feel a little bit afraid of the term automation, because uh, usually when it comes to automation they might think that they're going to lose their jobs. So because of those things we need to say that it's not about losing jobs or not about introducing a software system. This is exactly what we are trying to do, and to do this, this is the support that they need to provide, and this is what we are trying to carry out through the process assessment, and these are the things that we are looking into. And once the automation is done, this will be the result, and this is how the things will be automated, and this is how the way they work will be changed. So we need to give a proper and clear idea to them that this is what's exactly going to happen, and we need to align them to that uh, output that we are expecting, and then go for the process assessment and the discussions, so that it will be easy for them to understand what we are trying to do and why we are asking such detailed questions. And on the other hand, they also know that this is the output that we are looking for, so that they know what information they need to provide and what kind of support they need to provide to make that effort successful. So when we are actually doing the process assessment, we look into different areas, and those areas can be broken down into two parts. We look into process fitness, and then we look into process complexity, and also the organizational goals and their their expectations. So, so in terms of process assessment, we only look into process fitness and the complexity. The rest of the things are based on different other aspects, and those are used for prioritizing the process. So first, for assessment, the first main thing is to look into the fitness of the process. So to do that, we are looking into few areas, like the process should be rule based, the first thing. So in a process there are different uh, sections in the process or steps that where some decisions are involved, and we need to look at how these decisions are made by the people who do it. Are those decisions based on a predefined rules or set of logic, or they take the decisions based on their user experience? So sometimes we have seen that people take decisions based on their experience, but if we ask why they take that decision, there's no proper logic behind it. So for our automation to work, the robot cannot replicate or use the same experience a person has. So the decisions has to be defined based on a proper logic. So this is the first thing that we look into. And if there are decisions that we take based on experience, we need to make sure, or we need to look for ways where we can standardize that process so that those decisions are taken based on a defined set of logics. The next one is the process should have the low exception rates. That means there cannot be any scenarios where you don't know what to do if something happens. Or you cannot say that if this situation occur, we cannot continue with the process, or we don't know how to continue. So we need to look into those areas, because when you're automating, you have to start from somewhere and you have to end from the exact point each and every data set that's being processed is going to end. So if there are a lot of exceptional cases like that, it may not be a good fit for automation. So if there are scenarios like that, we need to look into ways to standardize the process by involving some process standardization experts. And the next step is to find the repetitive actions. So in a process, for each and every data set we process from start to end, what are the steps we carry out? And are those repetitive? And whether there are any automated paths in the process? Because we already have multiple software systems that do certain things in the process. So, are there any steps that are automated, or whether it's fully manual? So, to properly understand that, we look into the repetitive actions in four different ways. Whether the actions are manual and non-repetitive, that means all the actions you take in the process is done manually, and for each iteration or for each data set that's being processed, the actions are non-repetitive, which means for one transaction or for one data set, you do a set of steps, and for another, you do a totally different set of steps. Uh, so, those things might not be a good fit unless you know what uh, the logic to change those. On the other hand, is the manual and repetitive, which means you do the steps manually, and for each record that's being processed, you perform the same steps over and over again. It might be a good fit, so we need to dig deep into the steps carried out and find whether it's suitable or not. And on the other hand, some steps can be uh, automated, and some of the steps might be done manually, because we already have software applications that take care of certain things. So if the paths are automated and some steps are done manually, but those things are repetitive, we can focus on these manually handled steps and see whether we can automate them, or we can take the full process as a whole and figure out how we can improve it, or where we can introduce automation to support the existing automations. And then the standardized input. So, when it comes to different inputs, we can have a standard or a structured input, or we can have a non-standardized inputs, such as if you are processing PDF files, for example, like invoices, you might see the information such as the invoice number, the name, address. It's not fixed at the same location in each file. It differs. So if it differs like that, that means the input is not standard, but still we can process them. If the input is standard, that means you always get the same layout, same structure, but the data is different. Uh, so we need to look into those aspects to see how good, how fit this process is for automation. And along with that, we look into the process complexity based on some factors such as the number of applications we interact with, the nature of these applications, whether those are very old applications, whether those are web-based, desktop applications, and how we interact with them. Let's say if you need to log into a remote machine to connect to a specific application and do things there, that has a different level of complexity, not like you are doing the same thing in your own machine. So those things has to be considered, whether we need to do a image based automation, whether we need to connect to virtual machines, whether we need to connect to remote desktop machines. And on the other hand, in each application, how many screens that we need to get into to perform certain actions, and the different business logics involved. So in a process, as I explained earlier, certain things are performed based on different decisions. So how many variations we have in a process, and what are the steps carried out in each variation, and how these decisions are made. So all these things has to be recorded properly, has to be analyzed, because higher the number of variations, the complexity is going to be high. And in terms of input, what types of input we get, whether the input is structured or whether the input is not structured, whether we have like free text to process and extract data from, or whether we have input like Excel files, which is more structured and standard, and what types of inputs and what are the number of inputs we have to process to get the expected output. So all these things has to be captured by the business analysts and the solution architects by asking different questions from the process experts. So how do you know what questions to ask? That's why we need to have all the experts, and that's why we need to have business analysts who can dig deep into these processes and figure out uh, the questions that we need to ask as and when we do the assessment or the requirement gathering sessions. So every detail that we can capture helps to identify the complexity of the process and to do a proper assessment of the process. So based on my experience, I have come across situations where we do the assessment, but sometimes people don't share all the information. And when we do the assessment and get back to them, then they come and say that we have certain other steps that we do like this, etc., etc. So that shouldn't happen. So we need to make sure that we contact the right people and ask the proper questions and go into each and every step that is carried out in the process, record them, and then do the assessment based on that. So to do this, there are different tools which we can use. In UiPath, we have the automation hub, for example, where you can put in all the automation ideas like this. So, for example, if the company does not know what process to automate, and based on that prioritization of each department they are focusing on, then They can ask the process experts or the people who carry out different things to put in the ideas into Automation Hub, where you can do the assessment later for each and every idea they submit based on those areas we discussed earlier, and find the potential of the find the automation potential and the complexity. If you know the process that has to be automated, or that your company say that this process has to be automated, still as the experts we need to do an assessment to properly identify whether that process is actually suitable for automation or whether it needs further improvement, like standardizing certain steps which we can do and then apply automation on top of that. So one tool which we can use is Automation Hub, or else if you are not using that, UiPath has also provided a simple Excel to do the process assessment. So here we are looking into different areas like the types of decisions, input type, the feasibility, whether the process is changing in the time to come, or whether the applications are undergoing any changes, and the process running frequency, and so on. So there are multiple aspects that we need to look into, as you see here. So you can use these Excels or these tools to do your process assessment and find the automation potential of that process, which is automatically calculated, and to find the complexity or the implementation effort. So that same thing is also available in Automation Hub. As you see, if you go in here, it gives us all the information, the suitability and everything based on the input we give for those questions. So how do you record the steps they carry out? So we need to actually see the steps they perform during the process assessment or the requirement gathering sessions, because sometimes I have seen that people just explain this is what they do and this is the input they get and this is how they get the final output. But just by listening to that, it's not enough to do a proper assessment and to understand the steps they carry out. So we need to record these steps they perform. So how to do that is either ask them to do a screen recording of the steps they carry out, or else you can use tools such as the task capture to capture these interactions they do in a very detailed level. So we'll talk about these tools later in another set of videos. So using these tools and all the available resources, capture the detailed steps they perform, and that is very useful and very helpful for you to understand the potential of the automation and the effort, and where the decisions are made and how things are done at different stages of the process. So do that, as it is very important. So once you do the assessment and find the complexity and the suitability for automation, you can easily map those processes into these quadrants as you see here. Uh, so that is totally based on the information you capture. And if you have a lot of processes to assess, like in situations where they don't know which process to automate, this comes in very handy, because if you have like 10 processes and if you want to see what process gives you the best result from automation and from where we need to start, this allocation is very helpful, because you can see based on your assessment, if the process complexity is low and it gives a high benefit, that falls into quick wins. So those are some easy automations that you can do to quickly complete them and share the benefits with the management and with the business users. On the other hand, if the complexity is low and which also has some low benefits but still can give a good output or something to show and convince the other people, where we can do these kind of automations to improve the way they work and so on, those fall into low hanging fruits. And if you get high benefits but the effort and the complexity is high, but those processes are falling under must do improvements. So from where do we start? So based on this allocation, we can see what processes will give us the highest benefit with low effort and what we can complete quickly, and what are the processes that will actually take some time and effort but give us a higher benefit. We can prioritize based on these things and based on other factors like the goals that the company has and many other things. And then based on these priorities, you can start building the automation solutions. The best point to start is, if you're new to this, it's good to start with the critical quick wins because it gives a higher benefit and we can complete it much faster compared to the others, and you can show them to your management and to other business users that this is how RPA is implemented and these are the benefits you gain, and this is how it has benefited us in different ways. And then you can focus on the low hanging fruits, the processes that fall under that category. The must do improvements is where you have a higher complexity level, and sometimes you might need to do certain optimizations or standardize the process in certain areas to make it more suitable for automation. So while you focus on the quick wins and the low hanging fruits, the processes that you identify as must do improvements, you can ask the management or the other people involved to improve these processes while you focus on the other stuff. And then maybe after improvement, those things will fall under quick wins or low hanging fruits. So that's those are some of the steps we can focus on and how we can prioritize. So when you're actually doing, this is the last step of the discovery phase. Once you identify the quadrants and everything, then the next thing is to document all these things. Like you need to document the as is process and the to be process. So we use different documents for this, like the process definition document and so on. So I would recommend when you're drawing the diagram, the process diagram, the as is or the to be, you need to make sure that you draw these diagrams in the most detailed level, because it is very important to see that detail in the diagram, because that's where even the management or the technical people like the RPA developers and so on, they will look into this document and this diagram that you draw here to get the proper understanding of the process end to end. And having that in the most detailed level where you can break it into the subtask level, it will help to build the solution in a proper way, and it will help to plan the complexity of the each and every component and how they link to each component. So, and it also helps to identify what tasks that are still carried out manually and what tasks that are going to be automated in the process and what's the expected output. we need to give to other modules or other components, and what's the expected input, and what kind of errors that are handled in each and every section or the task. So I will do another video on how to do this uh, design in the most detailed level. So for now, you need to make sure that you have to have that detailed level flowchart of the process, so that it will be very helpful later to understand the process and to do the development. So these are the things that we need to focus in the process assessment or the process discovery phase. So once you carry out these steps, you can easily document those and go for the approvals. And so the approvals will take place, or will be done by the SMEs or the management, or the key people who are involved in that. And there might be several things that they ask for refining and putting it in a different way, but still getting that approved will be helpful, and it will be easy for you as well as for the business to clearly see what's happening in the process and how it will be automated and what steps will be automated in the process. So that is why uh, the process discovery is very important, and these steps has to be carried out properly in the discovery phase before we move into development. So I think this guide will be helpful for most of you to do a proper process discovery, or to do a proper requirement gathering and do a proper assessment of the processes, document them, and go for development. So we'll look into more details in each of those tools later in another set of videos, but I hope this video is helpful, and thank you very much, and I will see you in another video.